Good Saturday morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. If you want to follow along, we'll be in Galatians chapter 4, beginning in verse 12. And I have done it to myself again. I have broken off way too big a passage to cover. Put too much on my plate again. So hold on tight, and we will try to summarize this passage as much as good as possible. All right, beginning in verse 12, we're going to look at a passage here, and really, Paul is addressing a church history, a problem that has gone on throughout the history of church. Of Christianity, and that is the issue of backsliding, those who backslide away from the gospel, and the Galatian church is has done this, and really, I guess even maybe a little further than backsliding. There were false teachers and those in the church. They weren't just backsliding on their faith, but they had some teachers, preachers there in the church who had actually begun to attack Paul personally, attack his ministry, and they were doing everything they could to assault his character, which was running a real risk of damaging or even destroying the church, that those inside the church would reject Paul and his ministry. And so Paul is attempting to stop that from spreading, this issue from going on, trying to stir up in the people, to recall their love for him, how he had loved them, how they loved him, and the truth of the gospel, and how he had preached to them, their past relationship that had been going on, and get them back, I guess you'd say, on the right track. So we're going to look at verses 12 through 20. Again, for the sake of time, won't read that long passage. But again, the Judaizers, we've talked about a number of times, have been trying to get the Galatian Christians to work the Jewish calendar into their religion, and to keep their ceremonies, and keep some of their law, some of the things from the law as part of their their Christianity. That they couldn't really be accepted by teaching, that they couldn't really be accepted by God if they didn't take these old Jewish traditions, or even law, not just traditions, but law, into this. And so when Paul finds out about that, he urges the Christians there to reject this. And he says, I entreat you become as I am. He says, I've left behind those old ways. I have left behind the old law. You know my history. You know that I was as steeped in the Old Testament Jewish traditions and laws as anyone. He says, but I have left those behind to follow salvation by grace. But you, on the other hand, he says, you are headed back under the law. You're putting yourself back into a position of having to follow the law, again, of circumcision and the old ceremonies and those kind of things, that a person has to follow those to be accepted by Christ. And so he says, you're going back there. He says, I'm going the other direction. You're going back where we used to be. And so he reminds them here in verse 13. He says, I preach the gospel to you. He says, I was, even though I was hurt, I was sick. He says, I preached the gospel to you, and you accepted it. You received me. You loved me. You accepted my message. And so, why are you? What's causing you now? Verse 15, what then has become of your blessedness? What caused you to turn against the gospel and to turn against me. Even verse 16, he says, have I become your enemy? What is it that is causing you to do that? And he basically then answers his own question. In verse 17, he says, they make much of you, but for no good purpose. They, speaking of the Judaizers here, want to shut you out that you may make much of them. It's always good to be made much of for a good purpose, and not only when I am present with you, my little children, for I am again in the anguish of childbirth until Christ is formed in you. I wish I could be present with you now and change my tone, for I am perplexed about you. So the Judaizers, he says, that's the reason you're treating me like an enemy. He says, I know what's going on. Um, he says they're flattering you. They're trying to make you feel good and telling you all good things and working to drive a wedge between what I taught you and what they're teaching, working to drive a wedge between me and you. He says, but they're not they're not honest. They don't have pure motives. They're doing these things because they want you to brag on them. They want you to lift them up and honor them. Paul says, I preach to you because I want you to honor Christ. I want you to look towards Christ. He says again, I was suffering, I was sick, I was laboring on your behalf. I wanted to deliver you from a false doctrine and bring you into salvation to be transformed into the image of Christ. I wanted you to be like Jesus, and that happens when you live by faith. He says, but you're wanting to go back. And I don't understand that. Why in the world would you want to go back to a religion that puts you under bondage and gives you all these hurdles and gives you all these things you have to check off, and you got to go again circumcision, all these ceremonies, and you can't eat this and you can't eat this. He says you're trading the freedom of a relationship with Christ for slavery. And I'm perplexed. I do not understand why you would do that. And we have people today who still want to live that way. Rather than enjoy the freedom of Christ, we see them, you can look at them, and some of them we give names to. We call them, Muslims and Buddhists, and there are a lot of religions out there, and then there are some even under the guise of Christianity who want to add to the gospel and make it difficult to try to follow Christ. When Christ paid for our salvation at Calvary, it's not of works, the Bible says. We don't earn our salvation, but it is by grace that we are saved. Never forget that. Don't let anybody send you back. Don't let anybody, I'm like Paul, I'm perplexed by anybody who wants to go back to a system where they somehow have to earn their salvation instead of enjoying the free gift of grace through Christ. Think about it. Have a good day. We'll see you here tomorrow morning.